At just 14, Mary Judge was sent to Strangeways Prison, a child locked away in an adult world of punishment. How does a girl so young find herself in such a desperate place? To the authorities who would track her for the next decade, the answer was simple. She was leading a sad and depraved life, a label that would follow her into the courtroom and haunt her record. But the paper trail she left behind tells a different story, one not of depravity, but of suffering that began long before her first crime. Mary Judge's life began on the 7th of April, 1858, in Upper Russell Street, Walsall, in the heart of industrial Staffordshire. Her father, Patrick Judge, was a collier, and her mother, and Judge, formerly Lily, could not write her own name. Her mark on Mary's birth certificate was a simple X. From this small symbol, a story of poverty, migration, and limited opportunity begins to unfold. By the 1871 census, the Judge family had moved from Walsall into the Staffordshire Potteries, living in a crowded lodging house at Bostow Square, Hanley. Among the 14 inhabitants were Patrick and their children and another Irish family. Mary, then 12, was listed as a Potter half-timer, meaning she split her days between school and labor in the potteries. The work was harsh and hazardous, filled with dust and toxic glazes that could cause paralysis, blindness, and death. For a 12-year-old girl, it was a punishing existence that stole her childhood. Just a year later, the family moved north to Oldham, likely in search of work in the cotton mills. But for 14-year-old Mary, this move brought no relief. The Manchester Prison Register of 1872 records her conviction for stealing a woolen shawl worth 1 shilling. She was sentenced to 21 days of hard labor and confinement. The register also recorded something heartbreaking. Both her arms and the front of her neck were severely burned and contracted. The word contracted meant the skin had healed tightly, leaving her disfigured and likely limiting her movement. Whether caused by a domestic fire or a factory accident, these scars mark her for life in a society that valued women's appearance and ability. At 16, Mary was convicted again for stealing another shawl and sentenced to 9 months imprisonment, followed by 3 years of police supervision served at Manchester Strangeways Prison. Built in 1868, Strangeways was designed to break the spirit through isolation and silence. For Mary, this environment must have been mentally torturous. The police supervision that followed made rebuilding her life nearly impossible, branding her a habitual criminal in the eyes of the state. By 18, she was again before the court, charged with stealing a chemise. Each offense seemed born not of malice, but of poverty thefts of simple clothing items, likely for warmth or to pawn for food. Each conviction pushed her deeper into a system from which escape became impossible. In 1879, Mary reappeared in the Staffordshire Sentinel, charged with obtaining groceries by false pretenses. The court described her as having led a sad and depraved life and sentenced her to 7 years of penal servitude, a brutal punishment usually reserved for hardened criminals. She was sent through a series of convict prisons: Stafford, Millbank, Fulham, and finally Woking. Her records describe her scars in detail: burns below her chin, on her neck, on both arms, and on her left leg. Her physical injuries had become part of her criminal identity. Inside prison, Mary's records reveal 2 sides of her character. On one hand, she was defiant and repeatedly punished for quarreling, shouting, refusing to go to chapel, or singing in her cell. On the other, she was deeply human, writing letters to her parents, who had emigrated to Pennsylvania, and receiving replies. Those letters kept her connected to a family that never abandoned her. She also petitioned authorities for privileges and, in 1882, for permission to emigrate to America to join her mother. Her request was denied. After 5.5 years, in November 1884, she was conditionally released to a Roman Catholic refuge run by the Sisters of the Good Shepherd in Finchley. It was meant to reform women through strict religious discipline. But here, Mary's trail in Britain ends. Less than a year later, in September 1885, a passenger list from the ship British Prince shows a Mary Judge, aged 28, sailing from Liverpool to Philadelphia. Every detail matches: her age, birthplace, and timing. It seems her wish to start anew in America was finally fulfilled. In August 1890, a marriage record in Pennsylvania lists a married judge marrying Owen McGee. The date of birth, April 7th, and birthplace, England, match exactly, save for a one-year difference. By 1900, census records show Mary McGee living with her husband, Owen, an Irish laborer, and their 4 children, Anna, Janie, Mary, and Lawrence. Her parents were listed as Irish, just as in the English census decades earlier. She had found stability, family, and belonging in the New World. But her peace was short-lived. In 1902, an obituary announced the death of Mrs. Owen McGee of Jersey Hill, who had died of brain fever at 43, survived by her husband and 5 children. After years of institutionalization, suffering, and punishment, Mary Judge, once a scarred, condemned girl in the prison records of Victorian England, died as a wife and mother in America. Her life was brief but remarkable. Against all odds, she carved out a second beginning from the ruins of her past.